The stars looked different from here. Danny Cooper pressed his face against the cold window of the spaceship and watched them twinkle in the darkness. He was 12 years old, and this was his first time in space. Everything felt strange and new. His father, Paul, worked in the engine room of the ship called UCS Discovery. Danny had to come along because his mom died last year, and his dad couldn't leave him alone on Earth. The trip was supposed to take 6 months. Danny didn't mind. Space was exciting, even if he missed home. Captain Maria Santos ran the ship. She was nice to Danny and always asked how he was doing. Dr. Kevin Walsh studied aliens, though they hadn't met any yet. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez talked to other ships using big radio machines. Everyone on the ship was smart and friendly. Today was different, though. Everyone seemed worried and busy. Danny could tell something important was happening. The grown-ups whispered to each other and looked at their computer screens with serious faces. "Dad, what's going on?" Danny asked when his father came to check on him. Paul sat down next to his son. His face looked tired. "We're going to meet some aliens today, Danny. Real ones. They live near those big planets you can see out there." Danny's eyes got wide. "Real aliens? What do they look like?" "They're called Zephyrians. They look like dragons from the old stories. Big dragons with wings and scales. They breathe hot gas instead of fire." Danny thought this sounded amazing. Dragons were his favorite creatures in fairy tales. "Are they friendly?" Paul's face got more serious. "We don't know yet. That's what we're here to find out. Captain Santos wants to make friends with them. But aliens might think differently than we do." The ship's speakers crackled to life. Captain Santos' voice filled the room. "All crew to stations. We are approaching the Zephyrian home system. Prepare for first contact." Danny felt his stomach flutter with excitement and fear. His dad hugged him and then hurried back to work. Danny stayed by the window, watching the alien planets get bigger. The first planet was huge and red, with swirling clouds that looked like angry faces. The second planet was smaller and covered in what looked like crystals that sparkled in the sunlight. But the third planet was the most interesting. It was blue and green like Earth, but with purple oceans and silver mountains. Suddenly, shapes appeared near the planet. At first, Danny thought they were asteroids or space junk. But as they got closer, he realized they were ships. Alien ships. They were long and curved, like the necks of giant sea monsters. Each ship was as big as a city back on Earth. The alien ships moved in perfect formation toward the Discovery. Danny counted 12 of them. They were beautiful and scary at the same time. Their hulls seemed to shimmer with colors that changed as they moved. Captain Santos called everyone to the main meeting room. Danny wanted to go too, but his dad told him to stay in their quarters and watch through the ship's cameras. The meeting room had a big screen that showed space outside. Danny watched as one of the alien ships came very close to the Discovery. A door opened in the alien ship, and light poured out. Then Danny saw them. The Zephyrians. They were even more amazing than his dad had described. Each alien was twice as tall as a grown man. Their bodies were covered in scales that looked like metal armor. Some scales were silver, others were gold or deep blue. They had long necks and heads that really did look like dragons from storybooks. Their wings were folded against their backs, but Danny could see they were huge. Each Zephyrian had 4 arms instead of 2. Their hands ended in claws that looked sharp enough to cut through steel. When they breathed, hot steam came out of their mouths and noses. The lead Zephyrian was the biggest and most frightening. His scales were dark red, almost black. Scars covered his neck and arms. His eyes glowed yellow like fire. When he spoke, his voice was so deep it made the ship's walls vibrate. Captain Santos stepped forward. She looked tiny next to the aliens. "Welcome," she said. I am Captain Maria Santos of Earth. We come in peace, hoping to make friends with your people." The big Zephyrian stared at her for a long moment. Then he made a sound that might have been laughter, but it sounded more like a growl. "I am War Commander Vexthara of the Zephyrian Empire," he said. His words came through the ship's translator, but his voice still sounded angry. "You are small and weak creatures. Why should we waste time talking to you?" Dr. Walsh stepped forward. "We bring knowledge and friendship. Our species could learn from each other and help each other grow." Vexthara's eyes narrowed. "Knowledge? Friendship?" He said the words like they tasted bad. "In our culture, only the strong deserve respect. Only warriors have value. You look like children playing with toys." Captain Santos tried to stay calm. "We may look different, but we have achieved much. We traveled across the galaxy to meet you. That shows courage and skill." "It shows foolishness," another Zephyrian said. "This." One had green scales and was almost as big as Vexthara. "Small creatures should stay in small places. Why do you dare to enter our sacred system?" The tension in the room grew thick. Danny could see through the camera that Captain Santos was getting worried. Her hands were shaking a little, though she tried to hide it. Vexthara spread his wings. Slightly. Even folded, they were huge. "Your words mean nothing to us. In Zephyrian culture, actions speak louder than words. If you want our respect, you must prove you are worthy." "How do we prove that?" Captain Santos asked. Vexthara's mouth opened, showing teeth like swords. "Combat. Single battle. Your strongest warrior against one of ours. If you win, we will listen to your words. If you lose, you will leave our system forever. And if we—" "Refuse?" Dr. Walsh asked. "Then we will destroy your tiny ship and forget you ever existed." The room fell silent. Danny felt his heart pounding. These aliens were not friendly like in the movies. They were dangerous. Captain Santos looked around at her crew. None of them were soldiers. They were scientists and explorers. Dr. Walsh was old and spent his time reading books. Lieutenant Rodriguez was strong, but she had never fought anyone. Even the security guards on the ship were more like police officers than warriors. "We need time to think about this," Captain Santos said. Finally, Vexthara made that growling laugh sound again. "You have 3 solar cycles, 3 of your days. Choose your warrior or prepare to die. We will wait." The Zephyrians turned and walked back to their ship. Their heavy footsteps shook the floor of the Discovery. Danny watched them go, feeling scared and excited at the same time. When the aliens were gone, Captain Santos slumped in her chair. "What have we gotten ourselves into?" she whispered. Dr. Walsh was already working at his computer. "I need to study their language and culture more. Maybe there's another way to handle this." Lieutenant Rodriguez checked the weapon systems. "Our guns are meant for asteroids and space debris, not for fighting dragon aliens." Danny turned away from the camera and looked out his window again. The alien ships were still there, waiting like sleeping giants. In 3 days, someone would have to fight one of those scary dragon dash creatures that he hoped the grown-ups would figure out what to do. Danny had never seen aliens before today, but he was pretty sure fighting them was a bad idea. Outside, the stars twinkled like they were trying to tell him something, but Danny couldn't understand what they were saying. 2 days had passed since the Zephyrians gave their ultimatum. Danny could see the worry on every adult face. His father barely slept, working day and night to keep the ship ready. Captain Santos held meeting after meeting, but no one could think of a good solution. Danny spent most of his time alone in his room, reading books and playing games on his tablet. But he was curious about the dragon aliens. When the grown-ups weren't looking, he would sneak peeks at the ship's computer systems. His mom had been good with computers before she died. And she had taught Danny some tricks. The ship's communication array was always buzzing with signals. Most were from the big Zephyrian warships, but Danny noticed something else. Some of the signals came from smaller ships that stayed behind the big ones. The computer called these signals low-priority civilian chatter. Danny was good at puzzles, and languages were like puzzles to him. He started listening to these smaller signals, using the ship's translation program to help him understand. Most of it was boring stuff about ship repairs and food supplies, but some of it was different. These signals sounded younger, higher pitched. Sometimes they seemed playful, like kids talking on a playground. Danny realized these must be young Zephyrians. Baby dragons. Maybe the idea excited him. He had always been good at making friends with other kids, even shy ones. Maybe young aliens weren't so different from young humans. On the morning of the third day, Danny made a decision that would change everything. While his father was busy in the engine room, and the other adults were in another emergency meeting, Danny snuck into the communication center. Lieutenant Rodriguez usually worked here, but she was in the meeting too. Danny had watched her work many times and knew which buttons to push. His hands shook a little as he turned on the radio and set it to broadcast on the frequency the young aliens used. "Hello?" he said into the microphone. "Can anyone hear me?" 4. A moment. There was only static. Then a voice answered. It was high and musical, definitely young. The translator made it sound like a human child, but Danny could hear the alien accent underneath. "Who speaks?" The voice asked. "Your voice pattern is unknown." "I'm Danny. I'm from the human ship. I'm 12 years old. How old are you?" There was a long pause. Then another voice joined in, and another. Soon Danny was talking to what sounded like a whole group of young aliens. "You are the small creatures?" one asked. "The ones who came to challenge the Empire?" "We didn't come to challenge anyone," Danny said. "We just wanted to meet you and be friends." "Friends?" The word seemed to confuse them. "What is friends?" Danny thought about how to explain. Friends are people who like each other. They play together and help each other and tell each other stories. Stories? Now they sounded interested. What are stories? Before Danny could answer, he heard footsteps in the hallway. His father was coming back from the meeting. Danny quickly turned off the radio and pretended to be playing a game on his tablet. "Hey, kiddo," his dad said, looking tired. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay, Dad. What's going to happen tomorrow?" Paul sat down heavily. "I don't know, son. Captain Santos is thinking about volunteering to fight herself. But—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Everyone knew Captain Santos was brave, but she couldn't fight a 10-foot-tall dragon alien. That night, Danny waited until everyone was asleep. Then he snuck back to the communication center. He turned on the radio again, very quietly. "Hello?" he whispered. "Are you there? Danny Human?" Several voices called out at once. They sounded happy to hear from him. "You came back," I said I would. "I wanted to tell you about stories." "Yes, tell us stories," Danny smiled. He loved telling stories. He used to tell them to his mom when she was sick, to help her feel better. "Okay, once upon a time, there was a little rabbit who lived in a big forest, ... For the next hour, Danny told the young aliens about Brer Rabbit and his adventures. He told them about how the little rabbit was small and weak, but he was clever and kind, and he always found ways to solve problems without fighting. The young Zephyrians listened with complete attention. They asked questions about things they didn't understand, like what a rabbit was or what a forest looked like. Danny tried his best to explain. "The rabbit creature sounds wonderful," one of them said when the story was over. "But why did he not use claws and fire to defeat his enemies?" "Because he found better ways," Danny explained. "Sometimes being smart and kind works better than being strong and scary. It was a long silence. Then one of the young aliens asked, "Danny Human, do you have more stories?" "Lots more." "Would you like to hear another one?" "Yes, but we must be quiet. The adults do not know we speak with you." "Why is that bad?" "Because War Commander Vexthara says humans are weak and worthless. He says we should not waste time on weak creatures." Danny felt a little hurt by this, but he understood. "My dad says sometimes grown-ups think they know everything, but they don't always understand kids." "Yes, this is truth," Danny told them. Another story, this time about a wise old owl who helped other animals solve their problems. The young aliens loved it even more than the first one. As the night went on, Danny learned more about his new friends. Their names were hard to pronounce, so they let him give them easier names. There was Spark, who had bright red scales. There was Sky, whose scales were blue like the ocean. There was Gem, who had scales that changed colors like a rainbow. They told him about their lives on the warships. They were brought along to learn about battle and conquest, but they were often bored and lonely. The adult Zephyrians were always busy with warrior duties and didn't have time to play or talk with the young ones. "We dream fear at night," Spark admitted, "bad dreams about battles and fire. The adults say dream fears are weakness, but we cannot stop them." Danny's heart went out to them. "I used to have bad dreams too, after my mom died. Stories helped me feel better. Would you like me to tell you a bedtime story?" "What is bedtime story?" "It's a special kind of story that helps you sleep peacefully. My mom used to tell them to." Danny told them the story of the little prince who lived on a tiny planet among the stars. He told them about the prince's journey to different worlds and how he learned that the most important things in life were love and friendship and taking care of others. By the time the story was over, the voices on the radio had gotten sleepy and soft. "Thank you, Danny Human," Sky whispered. "That was beautiful. Will you tell us more tomorrow?" Gem asked. "If I can. But tomorrow is when the fighting is supposed to happen. We know. We are scared for you." This surprised Danny. "You're scared for us? But we're the ones who have to fight your warriors. We do not want you to be hurt," Spark said. "You are kind to us. No adult has ever told us stories before." Danny felt warm inside, despite being scared about tomorrow. "I don't want to be hurt either. But maybe everything will work out okay. We hope so too. Good sleep, Danny Human." "Good night, my friends." Danny turned off the radio and snuck back to his room. For the first time in days, he felt a little bit hopeful. He had made friends with alien children. That had to count for something, right? Outside his window, the alien ships still waited like sleeping giants. But now Danny knew there were young aliens inside those ships who were scared and lonely, just like him. Maybe they weren't so different, after all. As he fell asleep, Danny wondered if the adult aliens would ever understand that humans and Zephyrians could be friends. Tomorrow would bring the challenge that might decide the fate of both species. But tonight, for just a few hours, a human boy and some alien children had found something more powerful than weapons or warrior codes. They had found friendship across the stars. The day of the challenge arrived with alarms blaring throughout the Discovery. Danny woke up to the sound of his father rushing around their room, checking equipment and looking more worried than ever. "Danny, I need you to stay in here today." "Okay," Paul said, his voice shaky. "No matter what happens, don't leave this room." "But Dad, what if—" "Promise me, son. Please." Danny nodded, but he didn't really mean it. He had to talk to his alien friends. They would be scared too, especially if fighting started. Captain Santos had decided to represent humanity in the challenge herself. She was practicing with the ship's small collection of weapons, but everyone knew it was hopeless. The Zephyrians were too big, too strong, too fierce. Danny waited until his father left and snuck to the communications center again. But this time, Lieutenant Rodriguez was there, working frantically on the radio systems. "Danny, you shouldn't be here." She sighed. "Go back to your room." "I just wanted to. No arguments." "It's too dangerous." Danny trudged back to his room, but he didn't give up. He remembered seeing a small emergency communication panel in the storage room next to his quarters. It was old and basic, but it might work. He found the panel and managed to turn it on. The signal was weak, but he could hear voices from the alien ships. "Spark? Sky? Gem? Are you there? Danny Human." The voices sounded relieved and excited. "We thought you were gone." "I'm still here." "Are you okay?" "We are frightened," Spark said. "The adults are preparing for battle. They sharpen their claws and heat their fire breath. They speak of honor and victory." "We do not want there to be fighting," Sky added, "but the adults say it is the only way." Danny felt his heart sink. "My captain is going to fight your war commander. She's brave, but she's going to lose." "We." "No," Jem said sadly. "Vexthara is the strongest warrior in our fleet. He has never been defeated. But we do not want him to hurt your captain," Spark said. "She leads your people, yes? Like a mother leads her children?" "Sort of like that," Danny agreed. "She takes care of all of us." There was a long pause. Then Sky spoke up. "Danny Human, last night we had the best sleep we have had in many moon cycles. Your bedtime story stopped our dream fears." "Really?" "Yes." We told our podmates about the little prince and his tiny planet. They were amazed. They had never heard such a story. What did they think? They said it was impossible. Stories are supposed to be about battles and conquests. But your story was about friendship and love. They said such things are weakness. But you don't think so? Danny asked. "No," Jem said firmly. "Your stories make us feel strong inside. Not strong like fire and claws, but strong like we can be good and kind and still be brave." Danny felt an idea forming in his mind. "Jem, can you tell me something? Do adult Cepharians ever tell stories?" "Of course. We have great storytellers. They tell tales of ancient battles and heroic warriors. They tell of enemies defeated and worlds conquered. But do they tell stories to help people feel better? Stories to help with bad dreams or sadness?" All three young aliens were quiet for a moment. Then Spark spoke. "No, such stories do not exist in our culture. When we are sad or frightened, we are told to be stronger. We are told that sadness and fear are weaknesses to overcome. But what if you can't overcome them? What if you're just scared and you need comfort? Then we must hide our feelings," Sky said. "A Zephyrian who shows weakness brings shame to their family." Danny felt sorry for his friends. No wonder they loved his bedtime stories so much. They had never been allowed to have comfort when they needed it. "Would you like me to tell you another story?" he asked. "Yes, but quietly. More adult Zephyrians are listening to our communications now. They are suspicious." Danny told them the story of the Velveteen Rabbit, about a toy rabbit who wanted to become real through being loved. He told them about the little boy who loved the rabbit so much that love made it come alive. "This is impossible," Spark said when the story ended. "Love cannot create life." "Maybe not the way it happens in the story," Danny said. "But love does make things real in a different way. When someone loves you, it makes you feel like you matter. It makes you feel like you belong." "We understand," Jem said softly. "Your stories make us feel like we belong somewhere." As the day went on, Danny continued talking with his friends. He learned that word of the human boy's stories was spreading through the young Zephyrians. They were whispering about the strange tales during their lessons and meals. Some of the adult Zephyrians had started to notice. They were puzzled by the change in their young ones. The nestlings seemed calmer, less aggressive. They asked fewer questions about weapons and more questions about things like friendship and kindness. My parent guardian asked me why I was acting strange, Sky reported. I told them about your story of the little prince. They said it was foolish nonsense. But then they asked me to tell them the story again, Spark added. They said they wanted to understand why it affected me so much. Did you tell them? Yes. And something strange happened. When I told about the little prince caring for his rose, my parent guardian got very quiet. They said it reminded them of something from their own childhood, but they would not say what. Danny realized something important was happening. His stories weren't just entertaining the young aliens. They were touching something deep inside the adult Zephyrians too, something they had buried long ago. Danny Human, Jem said, can you tell us what happens when humans are scared or sad? Well, we try to help each other feel better. We hug each other, and we tell stories, and we say kind words. We don't think it's weak to need comfort. This sounds wonderful, Sky said. We wish our culture was like that. Maybe it could be, Danny said. Maybe your people just forgot how to be gentle with each other. Forgot? Yeah, maybe a long time ago, your people told gentle stories too. But then something happened that made them think only warrior stories were important. This idea seemed to excite the young aliens. They started talking among themselves in their own language, too fast for the translator to follow. We are thinking, Spark finally said. Some of our oldest stories speak of a time before the Empire, when our people were different. But those stories are forbidden now. Why? Because they speak of Zephyrians who are artists and healers, not just warriors. The Empire says such stories make us weak. Danny felt his heart racing. But what if they don't make you weak? What if they make you complete? Before the young aliens could answer, alarms started blaring from the human ship. The time for the challenge had come. I have to go, Danny said. The fighting is about to start. Wait, Spark called out. Danny Human, if your captain survives, will you tell us more stories? Of course. But guys, what if I don't survive? Then we will remember your stories, Jem said, and we will tell them to other young ones. Your stories will live on. Danny felt tears in his eyes. Thank you. You're the best friends I've ever had. You are our best friend too, Danny Human. May the stars protect you. Danny turned off the communication panel and ran back to his room. Through his window, he could see the Zephyrian ships forming a circle around the Discovery. The challenge was about to begin, but something had changed. Danny's stories had planted seeds in the minds of young aliens, and those seeds were starting to grow. Some of the adult Zephyrians were beginning to remember parts of themselves they had forgotten. Maybe, just maybe, stories could be more powerful than weapons after all. The main viewing area of the Zephyrian flagship was enormous, bigger than a football stadium. Danny had never seen anything like it. The walls curved up and up, covered in metal that looked like dragon scales. Hundreds of adult Zephyrians filled the space, their wings folded, their eyes glowing in the dim light. But Danny wasn't supposed to be there. It had started when Captain Santos was getting ready for the challenge. She was putting on the best armor the Discovery had, which wasn't much compared to Zephyrian weapons. Danny couldn't stand watching her prepare to die. I have to do something, he told his father. There's nothing you can do, son. This is adult business. But Danny disagreed. He snuck out of his room one more time and activated the emergency communicator. Spark, Sky, Jem, are you there? Danny Human, the challenge begins soon. Are you safe? I'm okay, but my captain isn't going to be. Listen, I have an idea, but I need your help. Danny explained his plan. It was crazy and dangerous, but his friends thought it might work. The adult Zephyrians have been asking us about your stories, Spark said. They pretend not to care, but they listen when we tell them. Even some of the warriors have been asking questions, Sky added. They want to understand why the stories affect us so much. My parent guardian said something strange yesterday, Jem reported. They said your story about the little prince reminded them of their own childhood before they learned to be warriors. This gave Danny hope. Then maybe some of them will listen to what I have to say. The plan was simple but terrifying. The young Zephyrians would ask their parent guardians to bring Danny to the challenge arena as a witness. They would say he was important to understanding human culture. It worked better. Then Danny had hope. Within an hour, a small Zephyrian shuttle arrived at the Discovery. Danny's father tried to stop him from going, but Captain Santos made the decision. If there's even a small chance this could help, we have to try, she said. Danny might see something we miss. So Danny found himself standing in the great arena, surrounded by hundreds of dragon aliens. He was the only human there, and he felt very small and scared. War Commander Vexthara stood in the center of the arena. He was even more frightening up close. His scales were scarred from many battles, and his claws looked sharp enough to cut through steel. When he breathed, steam poured from his nostrils. Where is your champion, weak humans? He called out in his deep, rumbling voice. Captain Santos stepped forward. She looked tiny next to the massive alien warrior. I am Captain Maria Santos, and I will represent my people. Vexthara stared at her for a long moment. Then he threw back his head and made that growling laugh sound. This is your strongest warrior? This small female? I am the leader of my people on this mission, Captain Santos said calmly. I take responsibility for their safety. Leadership and strength are not the same thing, Vexthara replied. You will die quickly, and then your people will leave our space forever. But before the battle could begin, something unexpected happened. A group of younger adult Zephyrians stepped forward. Danny recognized some of them as the parent guardians of his friends. War Commander, one of them said, we request permission to speak. Vexthara's eyes narrowed. This is not the time for discussion, Zethara. The challenge has been issued and accepted. But, sir, we have discovered something about these humans that may change how we view them. Nothing about humans could change. My view, they are weak. With respect, War Commander, weakness and strength may not be what we think they are. A murmur went through the crowd of Zephyrians. It was unusual for anyone to question Vexthara's judgment. Explain yourself quickly, Vexthara growled. Zethara gestured toward Danny. This human child has been communicating with our young ones. At first, we thought this was an insult or a trick, but the effects have been ... surprising. What effects? Our nestlings sleep peacefully for the first time in their lives. Their night terrors have stopped. They speak of things we have never heard them mention. Kindness, compassion, the value of comfort over conquest. Another parent guardian stepped forward. My offspring asked me yesterday why we do not have stories that heal instead of stories that celebrate war. I could not answer. Vexthara looked confused and angry. Stories are meant to inspire warriors and preserve the history of our victories. What other purpose could they serve? That's just it, sir, Zethara said. This human child has shown. U.S. that stories can serve purposes we never imagined. They can heal fear, bring peace to troubled minds, and teach lessons about cooperation instead of conquest. Impossible. Vexthara roared. Stories cannot have such power. But other voices were joining in now. More parent guardians stepped forward to report the changes they had seen in their young ones. My nestling asked me yesterday if it was possible to be brave without being cruel. Mine wanted to know why our ancient stories never mention love or friendship. One of the older nestlings began telling a human story to the younger ones. It was about a tiny creature who saved his friends through cleverness and kindness instead of violence. The young ones were fascinated. Vexthara looked around at his people with growing alarm. You are all being corrupted by human weakness. But are these things truly weakness? Asked an elderly Zephyrian who stepped out of the crowd. Danny could tell this one was very old and very respected, because all the other aliens bowed their heads when she spoke. Elder Nithara, Vexthara said, his voice suddenly more respectful. Surely you do not support this foolishness? I support understanding, War Commander. I remember stories from my own childhood, before the Empire grew so focused on conquest. We once told tales of Zephyrians, who were healers and artists, not just warriors. Those stories were banned because they made us weak. Or perhaps, Elder Nithara said slowly, they were banned because they reminded us of parts of ourselves we were afraid to acknowledge. The crowd was completely silent now. Danny could feel the tension in the air. Elder Nithara turned to look at Danny. Human child, step forward. Danny's knees shook as he walked toward the center of the arena. Every eye was on him. You have been telling stories to our young ones, Elder Nithara said. What power do you believe your stories possess? Danny swallowed hard. His voice came out as barely a whisper. I don't think stories have magic power or anything like that, but they can help people feel less alone. They can help people remember that there are different ways to solve problems, and they can help people sleep better when they're scared. And you believe these are valuable things? Yes, ma'am. My mom used to tell me stories when I was scared or sad. They didn't make the scary things go away, but they helped me feel brave enough to face them. Elder Nithara nodded slowly. War Commander Vexthara, I propose a different kind of challenge. What do you mean? If this human child's stories truly have power, let us test that power. Not through combat, but through demonstration. I don't understand. You have a nestling of your own, do you not? Young Kethmer, who suffers from severe night terrors that have resisted all our traditional treatments. Vexthara's expression changed. For the first time, Danny saw something other than anger in the War Commander's eyes. He saw worry and sadness. My offspring's condition is not relevant to this challenge, Vexthara said quietly. But it is, Elder Nithara insisted. If this human child can do what our greatest healers and wisest elders cannot, if he can bring peace to young Kethmer's troubled sleep, then perhaps his stories possess a strength we have never recognized. And if he fails, then we proceed with the original challenge. But if he succeeds, we must consider that strength comes in forms we have not understood. A crowd began to murmur with interest. Even some of the fiercest-looking warriors seemed curious about this new kind of test. Vexthara looked torn. Danny could see the conflict in his fierce yellow eyes. Finally, the War Commander nodded. Very well. But when the human child fails, the original challenge will proceed as planned. A section of the arena floor opened up, and a platform rose from below. On it stood a young Zephyrian, smaller than the adults, but still twice Danny's size. This had to be Kethmer, Vexthara's child. Even from a distance, Danny could see that something was wrong with the young alien. Kethmer's scales were dull and lifeless. His head hung low, and his wings drooped against his back. Dark circles surrounded his eyes, and he trembled constantly. My offspring has not slept peacefully in over 50 cycles, Vexthara said, and for the first time his voice was not angry. It was sad and desperate. The healers say his mind is haunted by visions of battles he has never fought. The fear dreams grow worse each night. Danny felt his heart go out to the young alien. He knew what it was like to have bad dreams and to feel scared and alone. Can I talk to him? Danny asked. Vexthara nodded stiffly. You may try, but do not expect success where our best healers have failed. Danny walked slowly toward Kethmer. The young Zephyrian looked up as he approached, and Danny saw eyes that reminded him of his own face in the mirror after his mother died, lost, frightened, and very tired. "Hi, Kethmer," Danny said gently. "My name is Danny. I heard you've been having trouble sleeping." Kethmer's voice was barely a whisper. "The dreams come every night. Dreams of fire and battle and death. I try to be brave like my father, but the dreams make me shake with fear. It's okay to be scared." 3 hours later, Danny found himself in the most important meeting of his life. The great council chamber of the Zephyrian flagship was filled with leaders from across the Empire. These were the eldest and wisest of the dragon aliens, beings, who had lived for centuries and seen thousands of battles. Danny sat in a chair that was way too big for him, his feet dangling in the air. Next to him sat Captain Santos, Dr. Walsh, and his father Paul. Across from them were War Commander Vexthara, Elder Nithara, and a dozen other Zephyrian leaders. "Let me understand this correctly," said Commander Gextol, an ancient Zephyrian with silver scales. "You wish to propose a complete change to our first contact protocols based on the stories of a human child?" "Not a complete change," Elder Nithara replied. "An expansion. For too long, we have judged other species only by their warrior capabilities. Perhaps it is time to consider other forms of strength." "But strength through combat has served us well for millennia," argued Commander Vorthak. "Our empire spans hundreds of worlds because we respect only power." War Commander Vexthara surprised everyone by speaking up. "I have spent my entire life believing that physical strength was the only strength that mattered. But today, I watched a small human child accomplish something that all my warriors could not. He healed my offspring's troubled mind using nothing but words and kindness." "Words are not weapons," Vorthak insisted. "Are they not?" Vexthara asked. "Today, I learned that words can be more powerful than any weapon. They can build bridges between species, heal wounds that claws cannot touch, and bring peace where fire cannot." Dr. Walsh leaned forward. "Commander Vorthak, may I ask you something? How many worlds has your empire conquered through force?" "Hundreds," Vorthak said proudly. "And how many of those worlds joined willingly? How many became true allies rather than just conquered territories?" Vorthak was quiet for a moment. "That is not the point of conquest." "But what if it could be?" Captain Santos asked. "What if there was a way to expand your influence through friendship instead of fear? Through cooperation instead of conquest?" "Impossible," several Zephyrians said at once. Danny had been quiet during most of the meeting, but now he spoke up. "Can I tell you guys about something that happened on Earth?" Elder Nithara nodded. "Please, young storyteller." "We are listening. A long time ago, there were lots of different countries on Earth that were always fighting each other. They thought the only way to be strong was to defeat their neighbors in battle." "This sounds familiar," Extal muttered. "But then something changed. Some of the countries started working together instead of fighting. They shared knowledge and resources. They helped each other solve problems. And you know what happened?" "What?" asked Kethmer, who had been allowed to attend the meeting. "All of those countries became stronger than they ever were when they were fighting. They built amazing things together that none of them could have built alone. They explored space and cured diseases and created art and music that made everyone's life better." "But how did they resolve conflicts without combat?" Vorthak asked. "They used words. They told stories about what they wanted to build together. They found ways to solve problems that made everyone happy instead of just making one side win." Commander Gextol looked skeptical. "You make it sound easy." "It's not easy," Danny admitted, "but it works better than fighting. When you fight someone, even if you win, they're still angry at you. But when you help someone solve their problems, they become your friend." "Friends," Elder Nithara mused. This concept appears frequently in human culture, but is largely absent from ours. Maybe that's what we've been missing, Vextara said quietly. We know how to make enemies and subjects, but we have never learned how to make friends. Captain Santos saw an opportunity. What if we could teach each other? Humans could learn from Zephyrian knowledge and technology. Zephyrians could learn about cooperation and diplomatic problem-solving. You would share your technology with us? Dr. Walsh asked, amazed. In exchange for knowledge about these friendship and cooperation concepts, yes, Elder Nithara said. Our young ones are already changing because of exposure to human stories. Perhaps our adults could learn and change as well. But what about our warrior traditions? Commander Vorthak demanded. Are we to abandon everything that made us strong? Vextara stood up, his massive frame casting a shadow across the table. No one is asking us to abandon our strength, old friend. We are being asked to add new kinds of strength to the ones we already have. I do not understand. My offspring was trapped by nightmares that all our warrior training could not defeat. But a gentle story set him free. Both kinds of strength have value. Danny raised his hand like he was in school. Can I say something? Of course, young ambassador, Elder Nithara said with what might have been a smile. The best superheroes aren't the ones who just punch bad guys. They're the ones who know when to fight, and when to help, and when to find a different way to solve problems. Maybe Zephyrians could be like that too. Superheroes? Several aliens asked. They're characters from our stories. They have amazing powers, but they use them to protect people and make the world better. Kethmer's eyes lit up. Could you tell us stories about these superheroes? Absolutely. There's this one hero who's super strong, but his greatest power is that he never gives up hope, even when things look impossible. Hope, Elder Nithara repeated. Another concept we have neglected in our culture. The meeting continued for hours. By the end, something incredible had happened. The Zephyrian Empire had agreed to establish the first peaceful first contact protocol in their history. Instead of challenging new species to combat, they would first try to understand their culture and see what they could learn from each other. They would still maintain their military strength, but they would try friendship before fighting. This will require a complete restructuring of our diplomatic corps, Commander Gextal said. We will need beings trained in cultural exchange rather than just warfare. We volunteer to help with that training, Captain Santos offered. And perhaps some of your people could come to Earth to learn about human culture firsthand. An exchange program, Dr. Walsh said excitedly. Young humans and young Zephyrians could live with each other's families and learn each other's languages and customs. I want to go to Earth, Kethmer said immediately. I want to learn more human stories. And I want Zephyrian friends to come. To Earth, Danny added. I could show them our libraries and movie theaters and playgrounds. War Commander Vextara looked at his son's excited face, then at Danny's hopeful expression. Perhaps this cultural exchange could begin with our children. They seem to understand friendship better than we adults do. Agreed, Captain Santos said. Danny would love to have Zephyrian friends visit Earth. Elder Nithara stood up, and everyone in the room fell silent. Then it is decided. Today marks the beginning of a new era for the Zephyrian Empire. Today we learn that strength comes in many forms, and that the greatest conquests are those that turn enemies into friends. She turned to Danny. Young storyteller, you came here as a passenger on an exploration ship, but you will leave as the first human storykeeper to the Zephyrian Empire, official ambassador of friendship between our peoples. Danny's mouth fell open. Really? But I'm just a kid. You are a child who changed the course of galactic history with nothing but kindness and a few bedtime stories, Vextara said. If that is not worthy of ambassadorship, then nothing is. 6 months later, Danny stood on the observation deck. Of a new ship half-human design, half Zephyrian technology. It was called the UCS Friendship, and it was the first vessel built jointly by both species. Beside him stood Kethmer, who was spending a year on Earth as part of the exchange program. The young Zephyrian had learned to love human ice cream and was teaching Danny how to speak Zephyrian properly. "Danny friend," Kethmer said. He still used the formal address sometimes. "Will you tell me another story tonight?" "Of course. Which kind do you want? Adventure, mystery, or friendship?" "Friendship," Kethmer said immediately. "Always friendship stories." Danny smiled as he looked out at the stars. They were heading toward a new system where another species had been detected. This time, instead of weapons and challenges, they brought stories and open hands. Behind them, a fleet of both human and Zephyrian ships followed. Not a war fleet, but an exploration fleet, scientists and diplomats and storytellers working together to make the galaxy a friendlier place. "Hey, Kethmer," Danny said, as they watched a new star grow bigger ahead of them. Got double quotes. "Yes, Danny friend." "Want to help me figure out what stories to tell the next aliens we meet?" Kethmer's scales brightened with excitement, a Zephyrian expression Danny had learned meant happiness. "Yes, but this time, can we tell them a story that we write together? A human Zephyrian story? That's a great idea. What should it be about?" "About a boy from a small planet who made friends with a young dragon from the stars, and how their friendship changed both their worlds." Danny grinned. "I love it. Once upon a time." As the friendship sailed toward new adventures, Danny began telling the story that would someday become legend throughout the galaxy. The story of how Bedtime Tailies became the foundation of the greatest alliance the universe had ever seen. And in the cargo hold of the ship, CA